Hey y'all, welcome to Bushcraft Wednesday. I'm Madden from Self-Reliance Publishing, and today we're going to continue talking about firecraft and talk about ferro rods or ferrocerium rods. As you probably know, ferrocerium rods are king of bushcraft fires as far as an ignition source goes, and we're going to talk about why that is, why you ought to carry them in your kit, as well as a couple techniques for using them properly. Now, ferro rods are so important and are held in high regard by bushcrafters for a couple of reasons. They work even when they're wet, so if you're in a damp environment, it's been raining or whatever, your ferro rod gets wet, you just wipe it off and you can still strike a spark. It's no problem. So that's one thing. They're not very affected by the wind, so even right now we have a breeze blowing. And let me try and demonstrate here. If I was just to hold my lighter out, it's doing okay right now. But if it was much windier than this, I wouldn't be able to use my lighter without going through great lengths to shield the flame. Sparks from a ferro rod are not affected to near the degree as a lighter is. It's also not affected by temperature, so a lighter, once you get below freezing, won't function correctly. But ferro rod, you could be minus 20 and it's still going to work just fine. And while they're both expendable resources, both lighters and ferrocerium rods, there's no gas to accidentally get let out like there is for a lighter. For a lighter, you can't see when you're about to run out of gas. You just go to use it and it no longer functions. With a ferro rod, you have a good handle on how much life you have left in your rod. You can see it. If it started as a 1/2 inch rod and you're down to 5/16, you know you've gone through the majority of your rod. So it's not going to get away from you like it will with the lighter. So those are some of the reasons why ferro rod is considered a valuable fire starting or ignition source for bushcraft fires. And once you get the hang of using them properly, it's really not that much extra effort to use one. Potential downside is that for most techniques you need to use 2 hands. So if you're injured, you have to get kind of creative striking it with 1 hand. But that's sort of a minor downfall, and you should have a lighter with you too as a backup ignition source. So that's why you ought to have a ferro rod. Now let's talk about what type of ferro rod to have. This one here is a 1/2 inch. It's pretty short, probably about 2.5, 3 inches long or so. So it's fairly short. Probably good to have multiple ferro rods in your kit. One that you carry on your person, that you use as sort of a backup in case of an extreme emergency if you lose the rest of your kit. One in your kit, which is, I would recommend a 1/2 inch by 6 inches long rod to use for your main fire kit. And maybe potentially another 1 or 2 tossed in random places in your kit just in case. They're not that bulky, they don't weigh that much, so it only makes sense to have multiples. When you first get a ferro rod, they come in a coating to protect them, and before you can strike a spark, you got to scrape that coating off. So like this one right here, I haven't used much. I still have the coating on this side. If I was to go try and strike a spark, it doesn't happen. But that second time, that coating's been scraped off and I was able to throw a spark. It's just something to be aware of. So a couple of techniques that I want to demonstrate. The first one is the pull method, and this is probably the one that's preferable to use. It's going to be the most conservative of your resource, which in a survival situation, you want to conserve resources, and this ferro rod is a resource. So this is going to use it most sparingly. And With the pull method, you plant your striker, whether it's a striker that comes with the ferro rod or your knife or any hard object can serve as a striker for a ferro rod. You plant that near your tender source. Imagine we have a tender source down here. I'm going to plant the striker, and instead of pushing the striker, which you tend to lack control if you're pushing it like so, if you plant the striker and then pull the ferro rod, you're gonna throw the sparks right down on your tinder where you need it. And you're going to maintain better control. That's the preferred way to do it. You're going to use less of your ferro rod to ignite your tinder source, but if you don't practice and you don't feel comfortable with that, another way you can do it is to plant the tip of your rod down there by your tinder source. So imagine that this is our tinder source right here. You're just going to plant the tip of that rod down there by the tinder source, and you're going to move your striker back and forth rapidly up and down that ferro rod to send sparks on your tinder source. So if you're working with subpar or less than ideal tinder, maybe it's damp, maybe it's not been processed very well, that might be the way to go in order to ignite that. But the best method and the go-to method is to, once again, plant that striker by the tinder source, pull the ferro rod back to throw your sparks. Well, I hope you found this helpful. Be sure to check out my other videos dealing with firecraft, bushcraft, and all things dealing with self-reliance. As always, I appreciate every like, every comment, and every subscribe. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.